Welcome to Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today my guest is Nikki Palmer. Nikki, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you so much for choosing to join, to jump on this call and just go through the aspects of genius. Even though I feel like you might have heard this, in the time that we've worked together at the Kingdom Advancement Center, I know you heard this this message that I delivered to the kids, but I just want to know how it's hitting you personally. And if you don't already see it, I already see how you've been able to walk out some of these tenets. And sometimes it just helps, even if you're in your stride and you're hitting your marks, sometimes it just helps to put this extra little affirmation on top to really get you to the next level. So that's what I plan on doing today, if you're cool with it.
I'm cool with it. Let's get into it.
All right. So what I do first is I always ask this question, and it's very simple. And if you already, I want you to take yourself back to before you first heard this message. And before you may already identify as genius now, but the first time you heard me say this to a group and you were part of that group, I want you to go back to that point in time when I asked this question for the first time and give me your response then, because it may be different. Okay. And that question is, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
If I'm transparent and I'm taking myself back, I would say no. I did not consider myself a genius.
Yeah. And that's typical, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There are others in our community of creatives who are a little more confident. I've interviewed some of our creative peers, and they're like, "Yep, absolutely." And I'm like, "Okay, that's great." But the vast majority of us do not ascribe to this word genius, and there are several different reasons why, which I hope we get a chance to explain and explore today. So with that comes my second question to you, and that is, who comes to your mind, or who came to your mind when you heard that word genius?
I think that then people that came to my mind that would describe genius would be like a Bill Gates. Anybody on a presidential stand would be a genius. Anybody
past 5 years. Okay.
Anyway. Yeah, for the past, well, we have to go back a couple of years
right.
for that statement to be true. But you did say go back to when I first originally heard it. So I would think of people that whose names are a brand, that they have capitalized on some form of genius and have learned how to work it and walk in it.
So that's interesting that you say it's some form of genius. That implies something that I want to talk about a little more. So what do you mean when you say some form of genius?
Well, because as you know, I am a creative. So, I think of Bill Gates being a creative and how his mind works in his lane, right? But then there are creative geniuses. Not that I subscribe to any of the works of this person, but I do believe that, like a Tyler Perry, that there's a genius. He's tapped into his genius, right? And he's been able to capitalize on it and give it life that's survived, right? And then I think of the genius of, even someone like a Michael Jordan, with the athletics. So that's what I mean by different forms, that it comes in different ways, but there's success that marks all of them.
Yeah. And so I think you are already where I need a person to be able to receive this, because what you're saying is you recognize that there's different forms. It's not just, most people bring Albert Einstein into the equation, and rightly so. But what people tend to do is, whether it's Bill Gates, Michael Jordan, Tyler Perry, Albert Einstein, that have their own lane of genius, what people tend to do is they look at that person, give them that title of genius, because we're good with identifying that in other people, and then automatically discount themselves from it because they're like, well, I'm not Einstein, I'm not Jordan, I'm not this, I'm not that. And that is like one of the biggest things that we do to discredit ourselves, is to compare ourselves to someone else's genius, not realizing that there's more than one type. Right. And so the fact that there's more than one type, even Albert Einstein, I feel like he knew this, because there's this quote that I often say to people that purportedly comes from him. And it goes like this. What he has been reported to have said is, if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
I haven't heard that one. That's a good one though.
Yeah, right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I mean, how does that hit you? How do you internalize it?
I think that that's just very telling of our culture and our society and how we put ourselves in boxes based on people that are in boxes, based on people that are in boxes. Right? So yeah, that fish is going to spend its life in the wrong lane trying to accomplish the wrong thing because what it can do hasn't been identified, right? What its actual purpose is hasn't been identified. And I think that's a community, cultural, societal issue that we have.
It is.
We stay in boxes because people that have raised us were in boxes, or people that are teaching us are in boxes. And so I would have never considered myself a genius in any form because I wasn't inventing something, right? I didn't have a certain last name, right? Or I didn't have some supernatural athletic ability, right? So those were the things that would have been, I guess, the equivalent of my tree.
Yeah.
Right?
So. Yeah, and that's perfectly stated because these people who are in boxes, oftentimes people that are in boxes when I see other people in boxes. I got limitations, you got to have limitations too. If I got to deal with it, you got to deal with it, right? And so the first error in this analogy is that there's somebody else that's misjudging this fish, but doing it in such a way that the fish is hearing it often enough that it begins to inform what the fish thinks of itself. Instead of simply looking around, you've used this phrase several times, and I love it because you're saying like your lane. What's your lane? The fish's lane is obviously not land, right?
Right.
The lane is water.
Right.
The fish's element is water. And if you put this fish in its element, it's going to take off. It's going to show you what it was designed to do, why it was designed to do it, and it's going to tell you, and it's going to show you how well. And it's almost intrinsic to the fish. You put it in water, it's going to take off. But if it stays on land, I mean, very literally, what's going to happen to a fish out of water? If a fish is out of water, it's going to
die eventually. Yeah.
And our potential is dying by and large because we are judging ourselves by somebody else's lane. We are judging ourselves outside of our element according to someone else's element, and we haven't given ourselves a space, nor have we been given the space to explore what our element is.
Right.
If it doesn't fit into a certain mold, right? And so, my biggest thing that I tell young people is like, look, genius isn't necessarily IQ driven. That's one type of genius. Genius isn't necessarily GPA driven. That's one type of genius. It's academic, but there's so much more outside of that. Like you mentioned it, the creative genius, right? And so that's like my job is to help people figure out what it is that you've been called to ultimately, what it is that you were designed to do so that you can continue to do it. Because most people I already identify you, like you're already operating in it. You just didn't identify it as such.
Right.
And so based on that, I just want to build off of 3 components that will help construct genius, and it's passion, talent, and purpose. Right. And I don't normally talk about this, but I want to set this. I feel like I want to set this off right away because you brought this up. You talked about Jordan and the supernatural ability that he has. When I talk to athletes about this, one of the things that they often tell me is like, hey, well, my passion is basketball. And I'm like, okay, I can see how you would say that, but let's go through this equation and see if that doesn't change. All right. So let's talk about passion a little bit.
Okay.
What do you define? Not your passion right now, just generically, what do you think of when you hear this word passion?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. When I hear the word passion,
a heart right above your head too.
I know, right? That's like, let me grab a thought real quick. You know what? I would say that it is a relentless desire to keep moving, to keep doing something.
I like that. A relentless desire to keep doing something.
Yeah.
That is
I think of, and I don't know who said it, but you have to know your why. Yeah. Like the why behind what you do, because you will ultimately have to defend the why when you don't feel like doing the thing that even you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That relentless piece I really like. I like your whole definition. So because it fits so perfectly in how I'm about to redefine passion. Most of the people would look above your head and be like, well, passion is about what you love. I'm like, yeah, that's cool in a certain context, but as it relates to genius, I actually want to focus on what it is that you hate. Like, what is it that when you look around, you're like, you always got to say something about it. Like, man, I hate when I see that. Not a person, right? And even when I talked to some kids and over the past couple of weeks, one girl put up to me, she said, I hate that I'm tall. And I'm like, well, I don't want you to hate something about yourself, because you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image and likeness of God, and that your soul is supposed to know right well. Like, no, don't hate how you were made. The fish doesn't hate how it was made. The fish hates that, it can't climb this tree, but when the fish actually gets some insight into what it was made, it's like, I hate that nobody's put me in my element. I hate that people are misjudging me based off of something that's not even supposed to define me, right? So it's not about who, and it's not about your attributes. It's about what in your environment makes you feel like this fish out of water. What in your environment makes you feel belittled, marginalized, pushed to the side, and makes you feel like you have no worth or value? Because the thing of it is, like, it's not just something that you continually talk about. It's something that you say, like, somebody should do something about that. And if you find yourself saying that enough times about a certain thing, then guess what? That person is you. You're supposed to do something about it. Right? This thing is not just something that tears at your heart, but ultimately, we're both ministers. We can talk about it. Ultimately, it breaks God's heart. There's a lot of brokenness in the world. And that original brokenness of sin, like God said, okay, I see that on the planet, on this third rock from the sun, and I'm going to put somebody down there that looks like me, that's supposed to talk like me, that's going to bring order to disorder, and is going to put right the things that are broken in this world that's breaking my heart, though. So he pricks each of our hearts a little bit. Says, like, I want you to get a little piece of what grieves me. So that'll drive you. That'll give you this relentless drive to do something about it. So yeah, how does that?
I mean, I'm right there with you. As ministers, we have our lanes, right? We have our areas. And the thing that grieved me was, I think that because there was no one in my tribe that could identify I was a fish trying to climb up a tree, right? That the thing that grieved me is that children were losing out on who God created them to be before they were even developed into who God created them to be, right? And so that's the truth. It's like he gives us each that conviction. And I have to use my mom as an example, and her, she loves healthy food. And I remember at one point having to say to her, I'm not your audience. Like, I agree with you. We all have to find that audience too. That connects with the thing that grieves us, right? And so I do believe that I agree with you. There's nothing that I can really add to that other than that's what I feel that the Lord has done too, right? Is that he gives each of us a little bit of a glimpse, right? The word of God tells us to love what God loves and to hate what God hates, right? And repeatedly in scripture, we hear the Lord saying, for those that have ears, let them hear. And for those that have eyes, let them see, right? And so there's this draw that he wants us to have. See what I see, hear what I hear, and then fix it, right? Fix it. And that's then fix it. There's a song by, I don't even remember the guy's name, maybe Michael West, called Do Something. And the lyrics are, like, I woke up and I turned on the TV and I shook my fist towards heaven. And I said, why don't you do something? And the Lord said, I did, I created you. Exactly. And so that's what it is. So you have to recognize that. And, sometimes that takes being very transparent with where you are, because sometimes where you are is not where you were actually designed to be. And, then that's a whole another shift, right?
It's a whole nother, but I mean, we've already kind of talked about it, because I mean, I don't know about you, but one pitfall of being a minister is very much getting into this place where you start to compare yourself to other people. Like how are they rightly dividing the word and delivering it to this audience? I'm gonna get back to that because that was important. And you often compare yourself to the person that built you up to get to this point of ministry, right? That built you up into your discipleship. I mean, I'm speaking about me right now. I don't know. I mean, you can co-sign or not. Maybe you don't have this problem, but and then your peer group, right? We came into the Kingdom Advancement Center. We began to get equipped. We began to get licensed and ordained. And I began, whenever I would hear somebody else speak, I'm like, dang it, I didn't see that. Dang. I didn't say it like that. Dang, I didn't engage my audience like that. And I think that my wife and I have talked, and I know that I don't think she struggles with it as much as I do, but she has confessed, like, yeah, I hear that sometimes. Or you and I being, artists who, you're a spoken word artist. I am not a spoken word artist. I know my lane. I can read some poetry on the stage, but still, I've definitely heard you deliver some stuff and be like, doggone it, for real. I'm still reading from my book, and she up here having full-blown sonnets and soliloquies, like nothing, like just all up in here. And so it's a slippery slope to get into. There's one thing to kind of challenge yourself by yourself and by your peer group, but it's one thing to then look at that and begin to discredit what you have, right? But if you have this passion and you understand, like, hey, there's something that uniquely gets at me that is going to help define what I'm put on this planet to do, I mean, that's going to be a big enough task. You won't have to worry about what the next person beside you is doing. Because I mean, oftentimes the thing that's broken, it's not going to be something small. It's going to be something large, systemic, that you're like, man, how do I eat this elephant? Like one piece at a time. How do I get at it, right? But that relentlessness that you already mentioned, that drive starts with identifying like what you actually hate. So there's something that I like that you said. You was like, who's your audience? And I don't think I've ever thought about that. Like when you get into this place of your genius, you do need an audience, because you need people, you need to mobilize people to say, hey, look, this is a thing, this is a problem in the world. I have a way to solve it. And I need y'all to hear it so that I can get support, I can get the word out. So I never actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've never actually thought about that piece of it.
I remember the first time somebody brought that to my attention. So I can't take credit for that being like the revelation I got all on my own in my prayer closet with Jesus. But I had went to a writers conference and didn't bring any of my writing because, a well-meaning relative was like, somebody might steal your stuff. Don't take anything. And I get into this session, and it was a Christian author. And she said, how many of you have stuff written that you didn't bring? And everybody in the room raised their hand. And she said, you didn't bring it because you thought somebody was going to steal it, right? Somebody told you don't bring your stuff to somebody. And we're all like, why is she in our email? Like, she's telling us our business. Sheepishly, yeah, that's what happened. And she goes, I need you to believe that if God gave you something to do, he's already prepared the audience for you. And that's true. I used to think that, as I work in children's ministry, that, children were drawn to me for whatever reason. I don't have an answer, right? I don't have a formula. It's just the way God created me. And I at some point chose not to fight against it. Right.
Right.
But what the Lord recently told me was, I have given you the hearts of children so that you can have the ears of their parents. That's the connection. And so while the audience is the children, it's not just the children, right? Because I'm partnering with community.
Right.
But I didn't do any of that. I didn't orchestrate that. It was within like the small obedience of, okay, I'm just going to, show up in my lane and do the things that I know to do in my genius, right? And it's opened up communication, right? Yeah. To where now I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And the thing that grieved me, I'm now putting my hand to correct with the word, right? Applying the kingdom to that thing. And so the audience is super important. I think sometimes we, even the people that are surrounding you, we want the people that are immediately by us to support what we're doing and to be able to sow into it and to speak into it. And those might not be the people equipped for your genius. I know I've struggled with that. Like, well, can't I just use what I got right here? Like, why can't this be enough? But he definitely, I believe the Lord is strategic, his plans are perfect and he has those things in place. I think sometimes the comparison, us comparing ourselves, and I look, you were speaking for yourself, but you were speaking to me too. I've done that. I love everything about Pastor Kiana's delivery. I mean, I'm like, man, from her posture and her tone, I'm just like, that's not me, and that's I because I'm not Pastor Kiana, right? I'm Nikki. So I do things like tell myself often, the scripture tells us if we compare ourselves among ourselves, we make fools of ourselves. And so I try to still stay connected to people that I'm a little bit intimidated by.
Okay.
If that makes sense. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room, I think is how the saying goes, right? So yeah, I'm a little bit intimidated by this person's confidence or their gifts or their genius. So I'm going to stay a little bit close to them, because in doing that, I sharpen myself a little bit more. I develop in a different way versus, surrounding myself with people that maybe I intimidate, right? I think that it goes both ways. So the audience is important, the comparing, I don't know that ever goes away. I think that God just gives us the grace. He just gives us the grace to deal with it in every season. Cause I still do that. Like, wow.
And that's good too. I mean, there's a lot of little nuggets that man, go back and listen to this several times. There's a lot of little nuggets that you're dropping. Like you even said something like in passing, but I picked up on it. Like you said, in my small obedience. Like that small obedience is so important. Once you understand, like, okay, God, I hear that. This is how you made me. This is what grieves your heart and it's grieving my heart. And I'm going to do something about it. I might not know what exactly yet, and we'll get to that in a second, but it's like, I heard that. And I'm gonna seek after that and try and figure out how to address it. And in that, I think the comparison is cool. Like, don't compare your genius to somebody else's, but yeah, somebody might be a little bit more relentless than you are in your season. You're like, man, I gotta step it up. Like I see how they're going after their thing. I need to go after it. I need to go after mine with the same type of heart. So it's just, that thing of I talked to one guy one time and he was like, hey, look, whatever my genius is, I'm gonna rate it at a 9. I'm never gonna rate it at a 10 because that would get me complacent. I'll just be like, well, I'm good. I've done everything. Like, no, I haven't. There's always something that I can improve on. So I always rate what I'm really good at a 9 so I can make room to learn more, to learn how to do it more efficiently, effectively, bigger, better, stronger, whatever, right? So I mean, I want to talk a little bit more about, before I go to the talent portion, I want to just talk a little bit more about your passion, because you said that, when you see people basically, that when you see children who are impacted by this kind of fish approach where they're being told, they're being made to feel like they're less than. Most of the time, the thing that we see in other people is because we experienced it ourselves and we know exactly what it feels like. And when we get older, we internalize it and we're like, okay, I need to heal from that. But one of the ways that we begin to heal from that is helping others who have gone through what we've been through. So did you go through anything like that as a child?
You know what? I did. I was always a communicator. And by communicator, I mean, I talked a lot. Like, I just talked all the time, right? My nicknames were Mighty Mouth, Motor Mouth. Like, I was just always wanting to have a conversation. And so with that, obviously, the adults and your siblings, they just want you to be quiet. They just want you to be quiet. And it took me a couple of years to realize that what I was talking about all those years as a child, that people were like, you just need to, just sit down, just be quiet, just sit down, just be quiet. Like that was the basic standard of the request, is that I was usually trying to communicate some story that I had going on in my head, right? Okay. Like there was, my play was always really creative, like imaginative, right? I had this world that I wanted to share with the people that were around me. And obviously my older sisters, they didn't grab hold of that, and parents are working and all of that, and it's not the right place to do it in a classroom environment and all of that. And so, when I look back on even how I played, we just recently found pictures of my room as a child, like 5 years old. It was immaculate. Like made
Really?
my bed like I was in the army. You know what I'm saying? Like creases on the side. I was not nothing was out of place. But I had all of these dolls lined
Hey,
up.
pause for a second, man. Like you have the ear of my daughter at least once a week. Can you holler at her, please?
I'll be like, you know what? I hear the Lord. No, I'm just Maya will be tripped out.
Right. Go ahead.
So,
Sorry.
but I also used to line up dolls, right? I used to just line dolls up and just take care of this, multicultural array of dolls. But here's the fun fact: they never stayed with me. Like they was dropped off by somebody, and then somebody had to come get these kids. And so that was right.
Okay.
So it were things like that. And so, and people would make comments, that was weird. And the older I got, I never left that world, right? So
well, just make it plain for everybody that doesn't know you. What do you do now? What is one of the things that you do now that informs?
I am a children's pastor at the Kingdom Advancement Center, but I also spent over 2 decades as a nanny, as a professional nanny. So God had a purpose, right? That play was purposeful play, right? And so a lot of the conversation was basically about me just being still, right? Just being still and being quiet. Because I was always in go, 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 go. Now we have names for that kind of stuff now, right? They'll put a label of, attention deficit disorder, or you're hyperactive, all of these type of things. Yeah. But I literally had a world that I wanted to share with the people in my world, which would eventually end up come out in poems. I would start to write them down because, I wasn't able to talk them. So at some point I started to formulate those words onto paper and to put the world that I was hearing in my head, into words. That has taken a lot of forms at this point. So I think that the silencing of saying that children, I would hear things like, oh, she's super smart. But then when I would ask to do something that maybe was a little bit advanced, it was like, you're too young. And even as a kid, I would feel like, well, that doesn't connect because you just said I was super smart. Right. So, why can't I try this thing? So I was ahead of my time on the hypocrisy ball when it came to listening to how adults kind of, stewarded, us as kids. And it grieved me. I was like, I want to do so much more. I want to say so much more. I want to see
in boxes. These adults in boxes trying to put you in a box.
Right. So much more. And it obviously that turned into, some form of rebellion, right? It displays itself in these words that our society has. So it was like, no, I wasn't rebellious. I was bored. I wasn't, so that's what grieved me. And so when I get into the presence of children now, I'm emergent. I want to see what's already in them. And then help develop what I already see is in them. I feel like also, parents will start to assign things very early. Yeah. Like, you can do this, or you should do this, or you could do this, or you should do this. And it blesses my whole heart when I see parents saying, what did God create them to do? If Jeremiah 29 and 11 is true for me, then it has to be true for this child that I'm stewarding. And so this thought that a child is born and they're brought into this world, and then another earthly person kind of gives them their destiny. Yeah. That's always been something that's pulled at my heart, even as a kid. Like, no, I think I'm supposed to do something big, is my thought, but I have these limitations that aren't necessarily me. And then I begin to second guess myself, then I begin to doubt, okay, well, maybe I am talking too much. Well, maybe those words don't make sense, right? When I was talking in poems. That's why it was rhythmic. So they're like, that's not Nikki, that's not how you talk. That's not how you actually communicate. Not knowing, oh, she's doing this rhythmic thing. Right. Right. When she's trying to convey this story. And so just the silencing of children, because I'm like, they're just little people. there's two people, they're just smaller in stature. So that definitely marked a part of me growing up. And then I had a way of learning too. I don't know if you want to jump right in there, but I had a way of learning that was not picked up on when I was younger. And so I was much older when I was tested and found out I was dyslexic. And so the way that I see words is not the way that what they would consider the normal person seeing words, right? Letters move. I don't hear sounds, but I always wanted to talk, right? So I had a love affair with words, but words didn't have a love affair with me, like, in the normal sense.
Not conventional, right?
Right, like not in the conventional sense. And so I would say that I battled with boredom because I could hear something and understand it. But, sitting down to read long text in my mind didn't connect for me as a child. Mm-hmm. And so, you're reprimanded because you're told, sit down and read this text. And when you get up, you're supposed to comprehend it. Well, if I read it out loud, I'm going to comprehend it better because then I can hear it. Right. But now I'm disturbing the class. Right. And I got the type of personality that I can kind of carry anything. So I'm going to get through the class. I may not have learned anything, right, but I'm going to get through the class. And so that was definitely the thing that marked me. Like, I don't do it like everybody else. And I don't do it like everybody else because I'm not listening. I don't do it like everybody else because I'm being disobedient. I don't do it like everybody else because I'm always talking. So it was always like a negative connotation over my learning style, right? Because we didn't have all of these bells and whistles then that we have now to kind of pick up on a way that a child learns. They might be doing it way too much now. They weren't doing it all, then. And so it was definitely a struggle to have a voice, right, in an environment that's saying you're not doing the right thing, And so then it's like, okay, then I'm just not smart. So that's what I subscribed to myself. That's how I identified, is I'm just not that smart. Now, fun fact, I have a sister who's 4 years older than me that excelled academically. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about comparison, it didn't start when I became a minister and I'm watching people, so I have this sibling that's right ahead of me who's literally making, strides, and she's acing exams, and she had her own hurdle to overcome. She was epileptic, right? And so she was told she would never develop. And so to see her kind of break that barrier, and I'm like, but she was diagnosed for obvious reasons, right? Seizures are a much more outward, issue. And so I battled with that. I battled with trying to communicate what I couldn't communicate, right? And so I just resolved as a young person, I'm just not smart. And I was talking to my sister about this recently. I got into 5th grade, and I'm convinced that my 5th grade teacher picked up on my learning style, because we were given assignments on several occasions, and I was always given the assignment to speak out, to do it orally. Mm-hmm. Aced it every time. Yeah. And she would be the one that I now know originally unlocked my genius, right? So she would say, take this back. Don't read it in class, read it at home, right? So I could read it out loud. And then I would come back, and because my written skills, because of dyslexia, the written skills are lower. Mm-hmm. What my superpower became was I can hold large bodies of words in my mind, right? Yeah. There's a pattern that I see. It's a photographic memory meets, like a two-step dance, right? Like there's a rhythm that goes on. So I can memorize things. I can memorize now the speech that I did in 1984. Like it's still in that Rolodex of that assignment that she gave me all those years ago. So I may not be strong in one area, but the genius came out in a different way. Yes. I just, it just took years, right, to kind of understand it and then to embrace it, right? To not try to fight against the wind.
Right. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a circular hole, right? And you keep trying to, it's like, no, just logic says like find the shape that matches what's in your hand. It's not even like it's your fault. It's society and you see systems that are in place, like why you see what the mismatch is, like try to create the right, like this person has a peg, create the right hole for them.
Right.
And that's the brokenness of like the school system, right? So I have a story that perfectly mirrors what you're saying in that, you know, I went to a school as an adult with this message trying to empower these kids who were like in third, fourth, and fifth grade who were all labeled with ADHD, you know, ADD, emotionally disruptive, just all manner of stuff, right? All these negative labels. They didn't fit into classrooms. So these third, fourth, and fifth graders, about 10 little boys, all were in one classroom all day. And of course, you know, they were disruptive because how the system was relating to them wasn't how their learning style was. You mentioned that once or twice. I heard you say that. Like my learning style was different. And because the learning style is different, the information as it's being given to them, they're like, I don't receive that. I don't. And now I feel, you know, they're feeling a certain way. They're feeling like, I don't, this doesn't make sense. I feel like I'm off. I'm weird. I'm a fish out of water. And they would begin to act out.
Yep.
Right. And so, I mean, rightly so, I completely understood it. But when I would ask them what they hated, I mean, what they told me made sense. It was like, we hate school. And instead of being the adult that's like, oh, don't hate school. I was like, yeah, I understand why you hate school. But I was like, but I got a message for you though. Like if you're hearing me about, hey, whatever you put on this planet to fix that's broken, I mean, whatever is on this planet that's broken that affects you in a certain way, if you're meant to fix it, each of you is a future educator.
Yeah.
Because your learning style is what's missing in the school system, which is broken. And if you take that learning style and turn it into a teaching style and then go back into it, now you're providing this hole for this other person who has the same peg as you, who's like, man, when I hear you speaking, you saying it or you're doing it in such a way that I understand. This is my learning. Your teaching style is my learning style.
Right.
It's a match. And now you're making people so they don't feel ostracized. I thank God for your teacher. You said it was fifth grade?
Fifth grade, Regina Joannis. I've been
Regina.
looking for her. I've been looking for her for years.
It's
Regina
great that she
Joannis.
recognized that, right? And had the capacity to say, okay, I'm going to feed you this information in a different way that speaks to how you learn.
Yep.
Because that just doesn't happen enough. But
yeah,
if you can empower those so that they know, hey, look, the system is broken because I'm not in it to help contribute. Instead of just the system is broken, I'm gonna run away from it. I hate it, and I'm just gonna go. It's gonna remain broken. And until the system recognizes, hey, you're marginalizing the solution by putting these kids in with these labels and pushing them to the side for the sake of the others who learn conventionally, you're gonna keep missing people out. And I don't care what you say, we're gonna leave some children behind.
Yeah, it's going to. And the interesting thing is that when I did finally go back to go to college as an adult, I learned as an early childhood educator that there were 8 intelligences, so we're given this information, but it's not set up to utilize any of that in a classroom. But those young men that you were sewing into, I think it's important that they're hearing you're the solution to the problem, right? But even in how you address the problem, it might be an unorthodox way. So I did not like school for obvious reasons, right? I loved the social aspect of it, right? But academically, nothing thrilled me. History was my jam because history is a lot of reading and a lot of memorization, right? You got to remember dates and locations. And so that's the only place that I really desired to even excel at. But years later, the Lord would send me into a high school and give me a group of children that were all in remedial classes.
Okay.
And present me with a play. So I wrote a 5-act stage play. And my whole crew was a group of high school kids that had been written off, their behavior, they're in these remedial classes, good night and good luck. What are you going to do with that?
Right.
The play airs, we have it in front of the school. It's running over a couple of days. And their counselors are like, how did you get them to do that? And I said, well, first of all, if your expectation is low, they're going to meet that expectation. So they've done exactly what you've expected them to do, right? I never approached them like they were in remedial classes, right? The expectation was, you can do this. And not only can you do it, you can do it well. And no, we didn't read off, we read the scripts where we read them out loud, right? a lot of them had the same learning style that I did.
Yep.
And that was, oh my gosh, that was several years ago. Everybody that was in that play graduated college. More than half of them were first-time college students in their entire families.
Yeah.
They've gone on to be business owners. One just finished her master's in psychology. I mean, the limits were taken off in a 5-act play, right? You can start something, you can do it well, and you can finish it.
Amazing.
You know, so the school system is a beast that that has to be reworked.
I'm not saying like do away with the school system. The thing of it is, there's kind of a love-hate relationship with whatever it is, because it's like you love learning, but you hate that the way you were taught to learn did not minister to you, it did not service you directly. Right. Like this can work better. And so knowing that, you know, you're clearly already operating in your genius, and that doesn't surprise me at all, having known you as long as I've known you. But it's just, you know, for your hearing ears and for those who are watching, it's just how do you go through and use what was meant to be something that was limiting you and turn it into a thing that helps take the limits off of not only yourself, but others. And that gets into the next portion of it, this talent piece though, because anything that you encounter that's broken, eventually you're going to realize, hey, I need a tool to fix what's broken. And so our tool is God-given. Each of us has at least one God-given talent that we are to utilize to address the thing that's broken, and in doing so begin to fix it for ourselves and for the people around us who it's affecting in a negative way as well. And in fact, that's the entire equation, because the purpose in life, each person's purpose in life is to identify this God-given talent and then apply it to your God-given passion, unlock your genius. So, I mean, you've been talking about it, but I want you to say it explicitly, like, what is your talent?
Do I just name one? I'm just kidding.
Just name at least one.
I think I've identified more than one. Definitely writing, but writing to perform. I am taking ownership that I am a spoken word lyricist and an author. So I definitely, my passion and talent is in that creative arts and entertainment world. And so it's played into every role that I've ever done. So children's ministry, the spoken word, you know, so all of it's kind of married in there. But that's the landing pad.
Right.
Is the talent is definitely the pen of a ready writer.
Yeah, I remember you said it to me the first time. I mean, that's that scripture, right? We got a couple of scriptures that we call as creatives, as poets, right? As wordsmiths. So I'm gonna jump back to when I say, you know, when I talk to athletes, because you mentioned Michael Jordan, like now, does it make sense? Like your passion is not basketball. Like your talent is basketball, but how do you use your talent to address what's broken? And I think LeBron James, though I'm not a big fan of his, he exemplifies off court what his genius is, because he grew up in Dayton. I mean, not Dayton. That's where I passed. He grew up in Akron, Ohio, and I know a little bit about his history. That he was in a school system that was impoverished, didn't have resources. He had to go into private school so that he could get the right education and continue to get the exposure that he needed to delve into this talent and magnify that. But when he got older and he got these championships, he didn't just say, all right, I'm gonna rest on my laurels. I didn't raise myself up by my bootstraps and I'm straight. My mama got a house, I got a couple cars, my kids are taken care of. Like, no, I'm going back to Akron, Ohio, and I'm going to pour resources into the same school system that failed me by building this public school that has access, that has resources, that has teachers, computers, everything, so that and it's, you know, public, not private, so that anybody can get into it. So that now he's addressing what it is that caused limitations on him by taking off the limits on somebody else. And so that's what genius really does. It doesn't just focus on you all the time. It begins there, but then it turns outward and says, okay, who can I affect? Whose life can I improve based off of what I see and know that I can do well?
Right.
And clearly I see you doing that. You've been doing it since the onset of that play. When did you say you did that play for those high schoolers?
Oh my goodness. That was probably early 2000s.
And I mean, now that's like, 20 years ago, right? Yeah. So, and you said that they're accomplished now. You set right a course that was going to be less than what it should have been. And that's amazing. That's how this works. Right. So, I mean, you taking your ability as a wordsmith. Is it okay if I call you a wordsmith? Because
That's fine. I'll take it.
All right. So you being a wordsmith and creating these areas with words. I mean, that's one of the ways that we know we're made in the image and likeness of God. He took words and created the whole universe. Right. And so we tap into that, and then we're able to create a space and atmosphere for others to feel like, hey, you belong. Like I even hear, what I hear now is you're one who creates these places for people to thrive, much as God did with Adam and Eve. You create literal gardens of Eden for places for people to understand, hey, this is your function, and I'm going to create the best environment for you to thrive. If there's some things you got to follow. Like they couldn't just get into this play and do things however they want. Like, hey, look, I need you to do this a certain way. If you trust the process, if you trust what I'm doing, if you have faith in what I'm doing, you're going to excel. You're going to begin to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish, and you're going to be able to have influence that then improves the environment in the world around you. That's what I see you doing.
Amen. I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying not to spoil a thing before it's been said, publicly, but wherever you go, it's going to be, wherever you go or wherever you choose to stay, this is going to be the thing that goes before you and sets a place for you, right? Like the gifts of God are without repentance, and they make room for us, right? And so the gift of God that He's put on the inside of you is going to make room for you to make room for others.
That's right. That's good. You said something earlier that I feel like the Holy Spirit is bringing back to my remembrance about the vision, that it's bigger, right? It starts with us, but it's bigger. And there's something to be said about God's generational blessings.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes we think of that as being like monetary, but it's not that's not the totality of it. And when you just said to make the space, my sister and I did some soul searching and got into our closets a couple of years ago. And the question was asked to go back and look at grandparents and great grandparents and see what they started. Because vision is so big that it's not supposed to be accomplished just by you, just in your generation, right? Just in your lifetime. And so when we went back, we found that blueprint of what God had started in our grandmother, of creating spaces for people to be the best of who God created them to be.
Okay.
So we were like, what? So
what did she do specifically?
So she had a super small house. Like now I know why I'm attracted to tiny houses, because when you become an adult, you go back to these houses, you like, this is what I thought was big. She had a super small house in a small town outside of Illinois. And she opened that house up, I guess, to anybody and everybody. So she was running like an undocumented foster care in her home. Wow. And so we went back and revisited her funeral. Nobody knew. We didn't think anybody knew who she was outside of her family. But we were looking at the pictures and everything, and the streets were lined as though like a military person had come back to her hometown to be laid to rest. Wow. And through our tears, we're remembering, like, how did you know her? She fed me. How did you know her? She clothed. How did you know her? She let me come in and she, sewed into me. All of these people that she had opened up her door, she created this space for them and filled a need that they were lacking. So we were like, okay, this is the blueprint. The vision is bigger than just us.
It is
bigger than even our lifetime, right? And so we have a responsibility to make sure that we leave empty so that those that will carry it on can carry it on, type of a thing. So that was profound, because that just recently happened, where we were like, oh, this makes
a lot of sense.
This makes a
is this the same sister that was 4 years older than you?
This is the oldest, so she's 7 years older. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, still though, like, so how it manifests, it's this same seed, this same thread that both of you share, but that is still manifesting you different because your passions are different. And it's very true what you're saying, because talent is generational. Talent doesn't just come like there's two things about talent. One, it's not ours, right? it's on loan to us. That's why the parable of the talent makes it clear, like, no, this is my talent that I'm giving you. What's the return on my investment?
Right, right.
Right. What's God's return on the investment that He's given us? And we get selfish when we're like, well, no, this is my talent. I'm gonna do what I want with it. You putting your stuff in the earth, though. You're not giving me no return on my investment. And the
Right.
return on the investment is that space that you begin to create for others to be able to tap into what it is that they have as well. I want to
Mhm.
know what that I want to try and give you some time to, maybe not necessarily right now, but if you don't already have a name for it, what is that you and your sister discovered that's this generational thing in your family? Because that's not wordsmithing, right? That's a whole different talent, which you said it. You said, I have several. And I'm like, I absolutely believe you, right? But what would you call that? Because again, once you know what to call it, you can call on it a little better. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think that that I think that's still in the making. I don't think that
Mhm.
we've given it like a name. We've been saying like social service just because that's the only term that came up into our minds. Because
Mhm.
after we kind of did that blueprint with her, we realized that all of my mom's brothers have jobs and they're social service workers, right? They're
Okay.
they're social workers. My mother worked in the medical field, taking care. So everybody, all of her children had jobs that affected their communities, right?
Mhm.
Directly. So I haven't. I mean, if the Holy Spirit is dropping a good word on you, do share either now or offline. But
Sure, sure.
so yeah, we just we're like the scripture that came to both of our minds is was uh, I go before you, and where I go, I prepare a place for you so that where I am, you will also be. So
Oh,
that concept of, you're not an afterthought, there's a place prepared for you,
yeah.
um, was kind of like the landing pad right now. Because that's not wordsmith. But again, like you're saying, like that talent will feed into the passion.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, we're still digesting what
I think
exactly
social
that is.
servant is good though. Like as long as you have a name for it, that's why, and it has to be something that gives room for you to own it in your own way. That's why,
Mhm.
I use the word wordsmith, not for me, but for my children,
Mhm.
because they might not write poetry, right? But
Mhm.
they have this ability to create with their words. And so, if you make it generic enough, then it gives them room to feel like, okay, I don't got to write books. I don't have to do what daddy did, but
Right.
they know that something's on the inside of them. You seen what happened. They came
Mhm.
out with books. They're not really fooling with it right now,
Mhm.
but they still understand, like, I know that's on the inside of me. And it's going to come out in some way, shape, or form. And I trust the process now. I trust my Father in heaven, their Father, that He's going to get that to come to pass. However, He's going to get it to come to pass. I've given them the platform. I've shown them a
Mhm.
way to do it right. And so it I began to see things in my father, their grandparents, that I'm like, oh, okay, that's where that comes from. And it's
Yeah,
important to know it's bigger than you.
it
Like
is.
it doesn't, he gives it to you through your family, through your
Mhm.
lineage, because he's trying to accomplish something very specific through your lineage.
Mhm.
Right. And I mean, I think that's amazing. It lets you know that you fit in this tapestry, you have a place in this world, right? And part of that placement is to help others find their place.
It is. And I think that that's an amazing thing to keep something. It's like what you're saying for your children, to keep it generic so that they're not already in a box, right?
Yep.
Because wherever the Lord lands me, that I think that that's a part of the landing that He's doing, because I've not, now that I understand the genius, right, and I
Mhm.
understand that it comes in different forms. I know personally the pressure has been applied on me to not leave any stone unturned,
Gotcha.
right? I'm not just a children's pastor. I'm not just, a spoken word lyricist. Like there's a lot that's been kind of unearthed. Um, and making those connections of, okay, I don't have to be afraid of this because it's bigger than me and it's not about me.
Right.
I just need to put myself in a position, which I think what the Lord's doing in my life currently, of repositioning me to make sure that His will is done through me. Um, and so we'll see how that works. I think it's also important to know that it's not it's not a process that's like has an end date.
It's not,
It
which is
doesn't
kind
have
of
an end
frustrating
date.
sometimes, but
So I'm like, okay, I'm in this process, and sometimes it's very clear, and sometimes it's just that small obedience, like, okay, yeah.
yep. Well, this is my small obedience, just giving people this platform. I do this workshop so often, but it's in, groups of 10, 15, 20, 300, right? But the Lord is like, just do this one-on-one because people can pick up what's being put down, but it's hard to apply it without some more one-on-one direction. So, I really appreciate you. I already told you before we started that I know that there's people who are going to be serviced by your testimony because, this dyslexia, I was very clear when someone told me that they have dyslexia. I was like, okay, your learning style. I didn't call it a deficit. I didn't call it a setback. I'm like, you have a learning style though, that when you hear my good friend Nikki talk about her learning style that she shares with you and what she's able to do with it though, like I say, it's gonna bless your life because I don't compare myself to you when you speak, but I marvel at it though, because I'm like, doggone it. Like I marveled at it before I knew that you had dyslexia. And then to hear what your learning style was and how it functions to help you do what you do was just like even more mind blowing for me. I'm like, that's amazing.
Because isn't that God? Like you think that you would think that words came easy to a wordsmith, right? So there's still a connection. And I mean, just sidebar, I carry a thesaurus around. You're the reason why my vocabulary has increased. I'm like, another word to describe that. That's, there's more words than just some of these simplistic words that I put myself in a box, right? Like I didn't want to go into those deeper words because of my educational base, right?
Yeah.
So even that was breaking a ceiling. But for those or that individual that you spoke to, I do want to give this disclaimer too, and I pray that this encourages them, is it doesn't matter when you find out, it's what you do with your understanding. So I didn't find this out when I was in high school.
Right.
My testimony is not that I had a wonderful academic career coming out of high school. That's just not it. That's not, and I'm okay with that because that's a part of my testimony, right? The enemy will love to keep me on what could have happened and how that life could have looked and where I could be. And oh my goodness, did I lose time? And should I have been? And the reality is that I'm exactly where God has need of me, doing exactly what God has need of me to do. And so it doesn't matter if you find out in 30, 40, or 50, but when you do and you understand how it enhances who you are.
Yeah.
I'm an avid reader. I love to read and I don't shy away from that, but it's opened up a world that was closed to me prior to knowing.
Right.
Right.
And that approach can keep bitterness from setting in too.
Yep.
Like, man, I should have known this earlier, and being upset about, like, you got to be comfortable in your skin and be like, this is where I am now. And I think the thing that I'm seeing right now is so cool because what we're doing is actually linking dyslexia to genius. Right? And I don't think we don't hear that.
Right.
But it's a connection. It's a clear connection. Your story is a testament to it. So
I tell employers now, like, it's not something that I shy away from. It's not something that, that I'm insecure or ashamed of. This is just so that, it's just full disclosure. And it's just the way that I learn,
Yep.
So it's blessed my life. Like, I don't in any way, I know that there may be some to be like, pray that off and this, but God made us different on purpose, right? He literally made us different on purpose. And so I'm grateful for the difference that he put in me, long time coming, but it's here.
Yeah. A lot of times, this concept of genius is about taking off labels, negative labels, and then putting this one on first. Like, here's your name, here's your genius. Make sure that nobody, once you know that you're a genius, you won't accept these negative labels. But for you, it's not even about taking off this label of dyslexia. It's just about flipping it and being like, no, this is a part of the thing that makes me unique, the thing that helps that thing that helps me learn and retain information. And then that helps others learn to retain information as well. I mean, that in and of itself, I didn't expect this to happen. Like I knew that we were going to get into this part of the conversation, but just I'm trying to capture the words for it. Like you just left a wordsmith like wordless.
Well, I'm glad this conversation is dated then.
Right. But it's just that when you have that type of label, the goal becomes, like you said, like I got to get rid of it. I got to get rid of it. But it's a learning style. And I mean, I would even encourage you not to just say, hey, look, full disclosure, I have this, but to say like, here's how it's going to benefit you by how I operate. And then also a part of your audience, here's what I need though from you and from my environment to make sure that I thrive with my learning style.
Yep, that's exactly how my life is run now. And I would just recently, as you know this, just recently started a job with an organization that I absolutely love. They champion people that disciple children, and that's all that they do. So I contribute there. And when I interviewed with them, that's exactly, the way that I put it. And they said, we can teach anybody like the administrative side, and we can hire editors, to make sure that you're confident about what you're putting out on a print or on a web page. But we can't we can't train you on the strengths that come out of that style. Like that's kind of what makes me irreplaceable at that point for them. Yeah. And so it was one of those moments in the last year where God was like, just reminding me of the beauty and how he created us. Right. And just there's power and there's beauty, and we have to just trust the process, just trust the process. And I end up doing a spoken word for that organization. And, even that situation was different. They're recorded, like I'm being recorded. It took 5 hours to record a 5-minute spoken word. And you know how we usually do. We get up there and we do it from beginning to end.
And we out.
And then it's done. So to have somebody say stop, and then I stop, and they say, can you go back to the third line, third word? And for my mind to be able to, that word was the, and then we could pick up recording again. So it just be encouraged, if that's something that you do, that's a part of your genius, to, embrace it and run with it and find how it fits. And, that's your superpower.
It is a superpower. There's one more thing I want to say to you though, because I mean, I've told a couple of people this, and creatives especially, this talent is alive, much like the word of God. It quickens and it becomes its own agent, where it can begin to move as you give it life, as you give it room. And so even as I said earlier, that the Lord has given you, he's built for you these gardens of Eden. He's built for you these spaces. How he's building it though is through your talent, because the talent is his in the first place, and you've given room for it, and it's giving room for you because it's a living thing on the inside of you. And so I just want to link what was said before to this, like your talent that's coming from God is the thing that's literally going before you and creating these gardens of Eden, which is exactly what the word says.
Right.
It'll go before you and it'll make room for you. So I just felt like sometimes you got to put that extra little emphasis, that second degree on it, to say like, no, just know that this talent is an extension of God. It's on the inside of you, and it's literally creating environments for you to thrive and others to thrive. So just saying it a little different.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, we could keep going back and forth. Creators inspire creators. Words don't keep coming back and forth off of words, but we've done what we've meant to do. The only thing I'm going to ask you now is, I mean, it's evident, but I'm going to say it again. Like, do you consider yourself to be a genius now?
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pastor Nikki Palmer, for being on the show. This has been great, and I'm sure it's going to serve many others who listen to it. I am Reggie Key, motivational speaker, author, and scribe, and I'm your host for Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, and this has been my genius guest, Nikki Palmer. See you later.
See you guys later.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.